Welcome to episode number 31 of Wrestlerotica, the podcast that combines wrestling and fan fiction. This week we have one story to share with you. This story is entitled Room Service. After returning to his hotel room following a performance, Dean Ambrose is surprised to find two lovely housemaids in his hotel room. After overhearing a conversation between the two housemaids, Dean decides to change his plans for the night and instead makes the maids explain their conversation. This story stars Dean Ambrose. Without further ado, let's get to this week's story. This story is entitled Room Service, and it was written by Fanfiction.net users, TheSmuttySaviours. Room Service! Jody rapped hard on the last room. She and Lucy needed to clean before they could clock out. This special evening, where a bunch of assholes who pretended to beat people up for a living were getting special treatment and making them work at night without a dime extra pay. Room service! Hello! Shall we just go in? I want to go home already. Lucy, ever the voice of reason.
Charlie Brown, oh Charlie Brown.
When Jody threw tantrums, remained calm, even though she also felt disgruntled. We aren't supposed to go in without their permission. Just give them 5 minutes. Chill, Jody. Jody let out a huge sigh and slumped against the door. Get up! What if he opens while you're leaning against his door? Lucy hissed. I don't give a fuck. He's had enough time to answer, hasn't he? Seeing that Jody was in another of her moods, Lucy gave in. Alright, but if he walks in while we are cleaning, it's on your head. Or my butt. Butts. Jody said with a grin and swiped the master key card over the lock. Lucy raised her brows. No, you'd enjoy that way too much. Jody suddenly seemed a lot happier now that they were in the room, and home time was coming ever closer. Quit it, Lucy said, as Jody's shimmying walked to the bed. Oh, why? You're a little too uptight. You know that? Knowing you, I think you'd say, I'm too anal. Oh! Good point. The smile on Jody's face was almost comically large. But don't make fun of me for liking butts. Mine looks good in our little maid outfits. They're cute! Lucy groaned and glanced down at her uniform. A light blue housekeeping dress with a frilly white underskirt. It felt awfully old-fashioned for the 21st century, except for the fact that the bottom hem landed above the middle of her thigh. That seemed awfully short for someone expected to be a professional, especially in a job that required a lot of bending over. Yeah, whatever. I guess. It's just kind of short. And I don't like my thighs. They're all wobbly and stuff. So use that wobble. Shimmy it up a bit. Jody bent over slightly and wiggled her ass, making Lucy laugh. Yeah, I know. You have a cute butt. Stop bragging. Lucy swiped at Jody's butt, making her squeak. Alright, let's get this shit started, shall we? They began to pull off the bedsheets and toss them into their hamper. Together they spread the fresh sheets out across the bed. They bent over to fold and tuck the sheets under the mattress when they heard the click of the keycard unlocking the door. Shit, Jody swore. Lucy put her finger to her lip. The guests didn't know how things worked here. It would look so much worse if they acted like they had been caught in the act. If they were chill about it, he would be none the wiser that they'd broken the rules. Lucy looked over her shoulder to politely greet the guests. Hello, she squeaked out once she got over the initial shock of how hot he was. Clearly, wrestling had changed a lot since she had last watched it as a kid. The hottest guy way back then was Shawn Michaels and his ridiculous zebra-patterned chaps.
I think I'm cute. I know I'm sexy.
But their handsome guest seemed a little arrogant. It appeared he wasn't planning on greeting her soon, as his eyes were firmly fixed on her ass. Jody did not bother to look at him. Oh well, all the more for her. When he finally lifted his quite heavily hooded eyes, he fixed her with a panty-dropping look.
Now that's impressive.
Hello, ladies. Lucy noticed Jody twitch beside her. She reached out a shy hand over her backside and smoothed down her skirt. That was typical Jody. She talked the talk, but she wasn't very good at walking the walk. Jody glanced at Lucy sideways to mouth at her, his voice, with widened eyes, then turned to look at him. Lucy watched in amusement as her mouth dropped open. Hi, she said, after a very visible gulp. Don't mind me, girls. Just carry on what you were doing. Forget I'm here, he said, with a bite of his lip, as he let his eyes wander admiringly over their asses again. Lucy turned her head to glance at Jody, who was still frozen and slack-jawed all. Thank you, sir, Lucy finally responded. I'm sorry that we're here so late. Management told us to come in tonight to clean your rooms while you were out. It's not what we normally do. So thank you for being so cool about it. You were our last room for the night. So, I'm sorry that we forgot to put up the housekeeping sign on the door handle. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, so there's no need to be so formal, darling. You can call me Dean. What can I call you, ladies? I'm Lucy, and this is... Jody! I'm Jody! She had apparently come out of her temporary state of shock long enough to introduce herself. She noticed that her hand was still covering her butt, and that this ridiculously good-looking guest was checking it out. Her face quickly became a rosy red color against her otherwise ivory skin. Lucy and Jody, huh? Cute. Anyway, do you two mind if I take a shower real quick? I'm meeting up with my boys a little later, and I didn't feel like waiting for the shower back at the arena. You know, this one is much nicer anyways. Oh! By all means, please do, Jody blurted out. Lucy's eyes widened at Jody's sudden boldness. I mean, you know, we'll just keep working out here, so, you know, do what you need to do. Don't hesitate to give us a shout if you need anything. Like towels, Lucy added smoothly. Thank you. You're being very helpful, ladies. I'll make sure to leave you a big, juicy tip.
Just the tip!
He then smiled and turned his back on them to enter the bathroom. Both pairs of eyes went straight to his jean-clad ass. When Lucy looked to her partner in crime, she saw that Jody had turned her hands into claws. Lucy held in her laughter until the door was locked and she could hear that he had turned the shower on. Put it there, she said, raising her hand. Jody slapped her an enthusiastic high five and fell to her ass on the bed and giggles. Did you hear what he said? He said he would leave us a big, juicy tip.
Just the tip?
He wants us. We might actually stand a chance. You think? Lucy said. Jody wasn't sure if Lucy was being sarcastic or felt uncertain. It was probably a bit of both. Let's just see what happens, huh? Anyway, you'd faint if he actually tried it on with us. Oh, piss off, Jody said, and flipped her the bird with a grin. She got off the bed and picked up the polish and duster from their trolley to start on another job, but she dropped it back down on the bedside table after giving it a quick wipe. That ass, though, she said with a sigh. Yes, but let's get this room done. Lucy pumped the pillows and watched Jody continue her idle attempts at polishing. Nothing needs doing, though, Jody whined, finally giving up the pretense that she was actually working. The things I would do to that ass, she sighed dramatically. Like rimming? Lucy couldn't resist teasing. Don't knock it until you've tried rimming a magnificent ass. Well, I wouldn't say no. I want to smack it, though. Actually, I want to fill my hands. That boy can fill out a pair of jeans. Lucy abruptly stopped talking when she noticed Jody look over her head and then drop her can of polish to the floor with a clatter. She then pressed her cloth to her heart. Lucy listened to the silence of the room. No shower spray. She closed her eyes and breathed, hoping this would dissipate the slow, red creep building up to her cheeks. Sir, can we help you with anything? Oh my God, she muttered when she turned around and saw him. He was fresh out of the shower, still dripping wet, holding a big white towel around his waist. The two of them stared at the beads of water forming and running down his body for a moment before coming to their senses. If he was a humble man, he may have tried to hide his smirk, but he clearly enjoyed the reaction he was getting. Nah, I don't really need anything. I do want to hear the rest of your thoughts on my ass, though. It sounds like you had some strong opinions. Oh, fuck! You heard that? Lucy muttered quietly. Loud and clear, sweetheart. I'm sorry, sir. That was very inappropriate. and unprofessional of me. Not at all. I get off on hearing what chicks say about my ass. I've worked really hard at getting in better shape the last few years, so it's nice to know. It's paid off, you know? Oh, it's paid off all right. Jody chimed in. I mean, I don't know what you looked like before, but... Her voice trailed off as she became distracted by Dean, walking across the room to his suitcase. Both women sighed in unison as they watched his hips sway, ever so slightly, underneath the towel. They bit their lips, hoping that maybe they'd catch a glimpse of something, anything, hidden by the towel. He poked around in his suitcase, possibly looking for some clean clothes to change into. A few seconds later, he shrugged and walked back over to the bed. Sitting down on the edge, he made a bit of a show of him, spreading his legs, and grinned when Jody and Lucy inhaled sharply. Much to their chagrin, the towel still managed to cover everything they wanted to see. So, like I said, I want to hear the rest of your thoughts. Don't you need to meet up with your friends, though? Lucy asked nervously. Nah, I'll just tell them that I found something better to do. I think they'll understand. He winked as he looked back and forth between the two housekeepers. Holy fuck! Is this seriously happening? Jody whispered to Lucy behind her hand. I don't want to think about it too hard and risk waking myself up. She whispered back. She cleared her throat and continued her train of thought from before. I was saying that I would like to grab your ass, sir. I bet it's just the right mix. A firm and pliable. Firm and pliable, huh? He laughed. That's a new one. He looked over at Jody and ran his tongue along his lower lip. What about you, sweetheart? Do you have anything to say? I was saying... Dean arched a brow as he waited for Jody to finish her thought. Lucy cringed inwardly for her friend. I'd do anything you'd like me to do to your bum, because you really do have a very nice bottom, she said, rather awkwardly. Anything in particular? It's just that I remember you said something a little more specific than that. No! That was Lucy, she said, pointing to her side. She was just joking. I don't think she was, he said, with a shake of his head. Then he stood up and walked slowly around them. Both women suddenly felt like they were in the principal's office. Thanks, Lucy, Jody muttered. Lucy made an open-handed gesture. They had failed miserably to keep their private discussion away from Dean. Now, girls, he said. Getting so close to Lucy's ear as he circled them, he made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up, and let his eyes linger sternly on Jody. This guy knew what he was doing. He had clearly sensed that Jody dug that. Get down on your knees, both of you. Now. The pair exchanged glances to confirm that they were both game, then slowly sank to their knees. Dean then sat back down on the bed. Crawl to me, he said with a crook of his finger, and I will ask both of you again how exactly you plan to worship my ass. Hopefully, you will do better this time. When nothing happened, he narrowed his eyes and lowered his voice a notch. I said, crawl. Both women swallowed hard when they heard his voice come out low and raspy. They weren't about to disobey him now. They placed their hands on the floor and slowly crawled forward. They weren't quite sure if he wanted them to crawl in any specific way, and now might not be the best time to ask. Eyes on me, ladies. You weren't too embarrassed to get an eyeful earlier, so don't be bashful now. I want to see, in your eyes, how much you want me. They lifted their heads and let their eyes slowly wander up his body, from his large feet to his toned calves, to his thick, meaty thighs that weren't hidden under the towel. They sat back on their heels when they reached him and looked up at him. Lucy knew that Jody was getting off on being so submissive, but it still felt a little strange for her. Good girls, he grinned. Now let's try this again. Tell me what you want to do to my ass. He grabbed Jody's chin with his strong fingers and leaned down towards her. And you'd better make it worth my while. I said that I do things to your ass because you have a really nice one. And Lucy asked if I meant rimming. He commanded her attention so much at that moment that she couldn't help but look into his eyes. He cocked his head to the side. Is that what you meant? Do you rim? I have. Yes, Jody mumbled. Have you? He looked over at Lucy and caught her glancing at the towel between his legs. No, sir. I mean, I've never been in a situation where the guy wanted it. But would you? He released his grip on Jody's chin and leaned back on the bed. If I were to bend over this bed right now, would you? Eat my ass.
Oh yeah!
If you wanted me to, Jody whispered. Beg me for it. Lucy looked at Jody. She was in a subspace all right, but knowing her as well as she did, she wasn't sure he could make her beg. Beg you for what? Beg me to let you eat my ass. Please, please let me eat your ass. He laughed. You look so cute and desperate, sweetie. I was going to make you beg a bit more, but you're nearly salivating at the thought. He then got up and turned around. He got to his knees and bent over the bed. Of course, he did all of this slowly. Lucy couldn't help feeling disappointed that he still hadn't flashed the goods. Lucy, lift my towel. Lucy yelped in excitement and quickly covered her mouth with her hand. It wasn't really like her to make such cutesy, girly sounds. She bit her lip and scooted forward on her knees until she was able to reach his towel. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and she could feel the wetness between her legs. She knew that Jody was just as wet, even if she couldn't see it. Her panties were bound to be soaked through by now. She placed a hand on the back of his thigh and let out a slow breath. She could feel how strong his hamstrings were under her fingertips. She slowly slid her hand up till it touched the towel. Use two hands. I know you want to, baby. Lucy didn't need to be told twice. She placed both hands on the back of his thighs. His skin was warm and even gave off a warm, musky scent through his fresh shower gel. She slid her hands up his supple skin until she felt firm mounds atop his thighs. Her heart raced when she pushed her hands even further up over the two globes. Her hands brushed against his crack, but never entered the tight gap. She finally flipped the towel up and inhaled at the sight of his ass bared to her eyes. Get over here, Jody. Lucy lowered her hands and moved aside for Jody. She couldn't resist sliding her hand between Jody's thighs when she was right behind Dean's naked ass. Jody did not flinch. They were familiar with each other's bodies by now. She felt the crotch of her panties, and even she was surprised by how wet Jody had become. His ass was deliciously plump and round, but still maintaining a tight shape. He reached a hand back and pulled his right cheek from the left. Jody stared at the asshole he had revealed, and twitched when she felt Lucy stroke her fingers back and forth between her legs. Jody let out a rattling breath against his ass. A gorgeous man's asshole was her most favorite thing in the world. How bad do you want to eat my asshole? So bad, sir. So bad that I can taste it on my tongue. May I smell it, sir? He laughed, low in his throat. It almost sounded like a growl. Since you asked so nicely, yes you may, Jody. Jody inched forward and placed her face right up to his asshole. She inhaled deeply, and Lucy could feel her getting even wetter. She was always amazed at how wet Jody got. How does it smell? Lucy asked. Jody moaned between his cheeks. He smells like a fucking man should smell. So good. Bury your face deeper between my cheeks. Filling your nose against my asshole is making me so hard. She grabbed his thighs and pressed her face in harder. Lucy grabbed Jody's panties and pulled them down to the middle of her thighs. She then rubbed two fingers between Jody's lips and felt how swollen and wet she was before slipping the two fingers into her warm pussy. Jody moaned against Dean's asshole, causing him to softly grunt in response. Eat it, bitch! Jody wanted to savor the moment. She pressed her lips against the crease between his ass and thighs, and kissed over the swells, before covering his asshole with her mouth. She felt Lucy's fingers gently working inside her, and when she flicked out her tongue to capture her first taste of his asshole, she clenched the muscles of her pussy, tightening her grip on Lucy's fingers. She dragged her tongue flatter over his hole, enjoying the texture and the taste of his skin. You're good at this, Dean groaned. She took her time lapping at his asshole. When the ring was quite wet, she pointed her tongue and pushed it through the tight muscle. Urgh, yeah. Shove your tongue in. You watching this? He asked, turning his head to look at Lucy. She nodded when she met his eyes. He rolled his eyes in pleasure when he saw that her fingers were buried inside Jody's pussy. Lick your fingers, taste her pussy, he demanded. Jody groaned at the loss of Lucy's fingers. But she continued to dutifully lick Dean's asshole. Lucy sucked on her fingers, nice and slow. Jody's cunt always tasted so sweet, and she knew how hot this must look to him. She also knew how good he must feel, as she had first-hand experience of Jody's skillful little tongue. Take lessons from her. You're next, he said. Then he watched Jody devouring his ass, leaving many thoughts swirling through Lucy's mind, one of which was a sort of nervous excitement at the thought of licking his butt. Clean my perfect ass. I think it's about time you did some fucking work. He teased Jody as if she needed any further encouragement. Jody quickened her pace, eager to please him, and hopefully eventually get a reward. He did say something about giving them a big, juicy tip, right? A girl could hope. Her face was so buried in his ass that it was getting hard to breathe. Lucy watched her friend in awe. She knew that her mouth was quite skilled, but she had never seen her so intense about anything. This girl really loved rimming. She had always talked it up, but Lucy was always hesitant to try it herself. Maybe this really was the time to give it a go, especially if this delicious man was ordering her to do it. All right, hungry girl, I think it's time for your friend to have a taste. Jody pulled back and wiped a hand over her mouth. A big smile was spread over her face. She wagged her eyebrows at Lucy, who reluctantly moved up behind Dean. She carefully moved her face toward his ass, but didn't dive in like Jody had. Hey Jody, grab her head and shove her face in my ass. Yes, sir! Jody smiled, and Dean frowned at her. Don't, she warned. But Jody just edged closer to her. She smoothed her hand around her neck and crept up to the nape, where Lucy had tied her long hair into a bun. Jody was a sly one. She knew Lucy's neck was very sensitive. You're like it, I promise, she said, while she fanned her hair over her shoulders with gentle fingers. She then leaned in to kiss her. Lucy closed her eyes and opened her mouth, surrendering herself to Jody's tongue and allowing her to fill her mouth with the taste of him. Lucy knew Dean was watching them make out because she heard him curse under his breath to himself. Jody pulled away from their kiss, then tightened her grip in Lucy's hair. Now Lucy got in position behind Dean's ass, much more willingly, but Jody's grip remained tight in her hair. Unlike Jody, she decided to take more control of giving this man pleasure and put her hands on his cheeks. She spread them slightly, then gave him her first tentative lick. She could taste that Jody had been there before, but she could still taste him underneath it. She continued to give little cat-like licks, but Dean was growing impatient. My dick is fucking aching so bad, babe, but I want to feel your whole face against my ass. Didn't I tell you to shove her face in my ass? Like that? Jody asked after letting go of Lucy's head, to give her a firm push. Her fist soon found its way into her hair again. Perfect, he moaned. Being this close and personal with his ass was quite overwhelming, but she could certainly understand why Jody got off on this. Her proximity to him pushed her tongue further up his asshole, and it wasn't so bad. Ew! Oh, you like it, Jody said into her ear, and then her hand scrambled between her thighs to find her panties and yank them down. Her dom side was coming out. I don't want you to be able to breathe, she said, then rammed 2 fingers into Lucy's pussy. Lucy gasped when she felt Jody's fingers thrust inside of her, and she gripped her own fingers harder into Dean's ass. The feel of his skin and muscle underneath her fingertips, the sound of Jody's voice whispering encouragement in her ear, the smell of his musk, and the taste of his ass. It was a sensory overload for Lucy. And it only turned her on more. She pressed her face even harder against his ass, circling his tongue around his hole, and occasionally slipping it inside. Fuck! Jody! Dean crooked his finger at her. Get that cute ass of yours over here. Jody pulled her fingers from Lucy's pussy and climbed up onto the bed next to him. Suck on your fingers like a good girl, just like Lucy did. She ran her tongue up her index finger before she wrapped her lips around both fingers and slowly pushed them into her mouth. She noticed him running his tongue along his bottom lip as he watched her clean her fingers. She couldn't help but smile at his reaction when she finally took her fingers out. "You filthy sexy bitch! I bet I could taste all three of us in your mouth," he said. "Do you want to find out?" Jody asked as she leaned in toward his face. He smirked at her and grabbed the back of her head, pulling her the rest of the way and closing his mouth over hers. She felt his tongue flick against hers, making her moan in his mouth. When he finally broke away, he smiled with his tongue stuck out. "That's fucking delicious." Lucy came up to breathe for a moment. "Sir, Dean, may I touch your cock?" "You can do whatever you want to, babe." He and Jody went back to making out, while Lucy returned her mouth to his asshole. She removed a hand from his cheek and ran it slowly up his inner thigh until she felt the soft skin covering his balls. She wrapped her hand around them and felt the weight of them in her palm.
We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands.
She then slowly slid her hand up to the base of his dick and snugly wrapped her fingers around it. He was thick, and when she reached the tip, she could feel that he was dripping with pre-cum. Lucy moved her hand up and down Dean's dick slowly, keeping a tight grip. His sharp intakes of breath filled the room. Her hand was slick with his pre-cum. She then stopped licking his asshole to rub the fingertip of her index finger over the hole. She felt him twitch in slight trepidation, but she spread his legs and pushed us out further for her. Taking encouragement from this, she pressed the very tip of her finger into his ass. He groaned so loudly. Ugh! She was afraid that any guest who had turned in for an early night would hear him. He then broke away from Jody's mouth noisily. "Yeah, do it," he moaned. Lucy pressed her left hand down onto his back and let her finger roam a little deeper inside the hot, tight tunnel. Jody was on her knees in front of Dean. She'd let her hair down and was now fully undressing. She met Lucy's eyes and they both smiled at each other. Jody then grabbed Dean's hair and pressed her bare pussy against his mouth. "Oh yeah! You're gonna worship us now," she said, looking down on top of his head. He licked the taste of her off his lips and looked up at her through his bright blue eyes. "You're both fucking crazy," he laughed before grabbing Jody's hips and slightly nipping at her pussy lips, making her cry out. Lucy pressed her finger into his ass harder and made him wilder, but they were all in a frenzy now. She lowered her head to lick his balls that dangled in front of her, too. She wanted to taste every bit of him. "You two fucking wait. I've got enough for both of you. I'll fuck you both raw," he said, before attacking Jody's pussy again, pressing his mouth against her hard, his stubble scraping her delicate flesh and his teeth biting her folds. He grabbed Jody's thighs and tugged on them so that she fell back onto the bed and her pussy was right under him. He ran his tongue up her slit and flicked his tongue over her swollen clit before wrapping his lips around it and sucking hard. Jody's hips bucked up at the intense sensation. He dug his fingers into her hips to hold her in place. Lucy peeked over his ass and watched her friend writhing on the bed as she was getting eaten out. It was such a turn on to watch Jody enjoy herself. Lucy groaned and bit down on Dean's ass, trying to keep her composure. "Let it all out, Jody! I want you so loud that the other guest can hear how good you felt," she called to her friend. She then turned around and slid her head under his hips. She licked his cock from base to tip with the flat of her tongue, feeling it twitch slightly. She sucked the pre-cum-soaked head into her mouth and felt her pussy throb at the taste. Her lips slowly worked their way down his dick until she felt him hit the back of her throat. Her mouth was full and her lips were stretched around his cock, but it felt so good. She moaned around him and let her tongue roam around, tasting every inch of him. She rubbed his asshole again before pushing her finger back inside. She heard Jody get louder, which Lucy took as Dean responding well to her work. She twisted her finger slowly and pulled it out before thrusting it back in a little faster. She tried to push it in as far as she could so that she could find his prostate and hopefully get him so worked up that he'd make Jody come in his mouth. Jody squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating all her feelings into her clit. Taking Lucy's advice, she let her moans escape her mouth uninhibited.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
When she felt her climax approaching, she tightened her thighs around Dean's head to hold him in place. She cried out when he finally pushed her over the edge. And Lucy felt his hips shake when Jody squirted in his mouth. Jody watched his throat swallow her juices and shuddered herself, wishing she could come all over again. Jesus Christ, Lucy. This guy is insane. Lucy had stopped fingering Dean's ass when she had been watching her friend orgasm. It was so satisfying to watch her reach her height of pleasure. She wanted to feel Jody's fat, swollen pussy against her own soft lips. But Dean wouldn't allow it. He suddenly got up, surprisingly springy, considering the craziness his body was going through. "Shut up," he said, crawling over to Jody and giving her cheek a light slap. Then he turned around to sit on the edge of the bed. He wrapped his hand in Lucy's hair, which arched her head back. "Are you ready? You've been fingering my ass enough. I think it's time I made you squirm." He then pulled Lucy up by her hair, threw her to the bed, and straddled her body so that his ass was in her face again. "Do what you were doing with your mouth before. Make me come in your mouth, bitch," he ordered. He then stretched his body over hers and licked Lucy's throbbing clit. Lucy hadn't expected to lose control so fast, but she moaned loudly on feeling his tongue.
Ooh.
"Jody, kneel at the end of the bed." Jody felt exhausted and sank to her knees slowly. "Stay. Good girl." He then went back to lavishing attention on Lucy's aching pussy. Lucy's toes flexed out and then curled in as his tongue circled around her clit. She reached between his legs and pulled his cock back so that she could shove it in her mouth again, eagerly this time. He had tasted so good that she felt disappointed when he had pulled out. He lowered his hips once he felt her lips around the head of his cock, sinking his dick all the way down her throat until his balls rested on her nose. He began to slowly thrust in and out of her mouth. The feeling of him fucking her face made her moan around his cock. Lucy wrapped her arms around his thighs and grabbed his cheeks with her hands. She wanted to feel his ass while he worked. Jody sat entranced by the way Dean's mouth moved against Lucy's pussy. She lifted herself up on her knees slightly to watch his hips grinding into her friend's mouth. She bit her lip hard and sank back onto her heels, only to find out that he had been watching her. Their eyes met, and he stared at her while he slowly lapped at the clit in front of him. He lifted his head and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Do you want a taste, baby? Come here and help me." Jody crawled over to the edge of the bed, and Dean grabbed her jaw with his hand, pulling her mouth against his. She felt herself start to get aroused again, and slipped a hand between her legs. Dean laughed against Jody's mouth when he saw her hand shuddering over her pussy. "Are you going to come again? I want Lucy to make me come." She purred as she rubbed her finger over her clit with her eyes closed. "Did you hear that, Lucy? Jody is such a slut that she wants you to make her come too. You're going to make me come first, then her again," he said, snapping his hips faster and faster, forcing his cock deeper into Lucy's eager mouth. She was overloaded with Dean's cock and balls, the smell, taste, and weight. The feeling of him continually thrusting into her mouth, desperately seeking his orgasm, made hers approach faster. She felt like her body was singing and dancing when Dean's tongue flicked her clit at a fast pace. Jody opened her eyes to watch Dean's tongue working and to see Lucy's body writhe beneath him when her orgasm came. She wanted to taste Lucy's clit too, to feel it against her tongue. She nudged Dean's head aside so she could get a taste of the after effects of Lucy's orgasm, and wrapped her lips around her clit. She sucked, and she could feel her body start to twitch again with another explosive orgasm. Lucy watched as well as felt it. She was sure Dean's eyes had snapped open at the precise moment Jody took her clit into her mouth, because she heard him curse and grunt loudly. Ah! Then a stream of hot, thick. Lucy dug her fingernails into the firm flesh of his ass as she swallowed his cum in several big gulps.
7-Eleven's biggest drink is your best value, and that's what makes our 44-ounce Super Big Gulp super.
She felt his cock twitch between her lips as his last few spasms of semen dripped out. He slowly pulled out of her mouth and swung his legs over her head, so that he was now kneeling next to her.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Lucy lied there for a moment, her eyes closed, and her arms spread above her head. You look awfully blissful there, Lucy. Enjoy yourself, babe? Fuck, yes. She managed to sigh out. Don't get too comfortable, though. Jody still wants to come all over your face. A smile spread across Lucy's face. Get her over here, then, she laughed. Dean leaned over the bed and picked Jody up off the floor, placing her back down so that she straddled her friend's face. It didn't take much for Jody to come again. Lucy quickly began to lick and suck on her sucking pussy, while she rocked her hips against her mouth. Dean wrapped his arms around Jody and cupped her pert breast with his large hands. She rolled her head back and rested it on his chest as he brushed his fingers over her already hard nipples. He lowered his mouth against her neck, leaving a few small bites on her delicate skin. Come for me, Jody. I want to watch your face, he whispered in her ear. That was the little bit extra that sent her back over the edge. Her body shook in his arms as she clenched her thighs around Lucy's head. Lucy rapidly tapped her hand on Jody's thigh, and Dean knew to move her away so that Lucy could breathe. Thank you, she laughed, licking her lips. I should be thanking you ladies. I didn't expect things to go this way tonight, but I'm happy they did. We were, just doing our job, sir. Lucy replied awkwardly as she sat up. I guess I'll have to tell your manager that you give top-notch service. He winked and shot them a cheeky grin. It was eerily silent in the room as Jody and Lucy put themselves back together and made sure that they looked as normal as possible when they left Dean's room. They pushed their cart toward the door, opening it and stepping through the threshold. As they were about to leave, he came up behind them and placed a hand on each of their shoulders. You ladies get home safe and have a nice night, okay? He leaned in between them and whispered into their ears as he placed a firm grip on their asses. And I hope you're still working here when we come through again, because next time, it's my turn. The end. Thank you for listening to episode number 31 of Wrestlerotica. If you enjoyed this week's story, please be sure to like us and review us on iTunes, as it greatly helps us out. Next week, we believe that we will have, and I'm excited for this, our first Halloween episode. Also be sure to follow us on our other social media sites, including Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and our official site, WrestleRoticaPod.com. Thank you and have a good week.